Hi, we're talking about Your Money Matters on NDTV Profit. My name is Alex Matthew. This show gets you actionable insight on everything personal finance related. We've got a great show lined up for you. First up, we'll talk about finding buried treasure. Not exactly. Well, it's kind of like that because we'll be talking about how you should react if you find physical share certificates that might have belonged to your parents or your grandparents, whether you can convert that into dematerialized shares, how to recover that. Second, we'll talk about what your grandparents used to do that you probably are not money-wise. And ultimately, there is a bit of a digital divide that is being created between the current generation and those that are super seniors right now. We'll also get you an update on how your taxation is treated if you are non-resident Indian, particularly if you are selling assets. And finally, we did a social media poll to ask you whether the RBI's move to allow minors above the age of 10 to have their own bank accounts is a good move. And the outcome of that poll is quite interesting. But my guest today in studio is Harshvardhan Rungta, who is the co-founder of Rungta Securities. Harsh, thanks so much for taking the time.
My pleasure, Alex. Always to be on the show.
And happy birthday. Thanks so much for joining me on your birthday.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alex.
I feel special, and thank you so much. Let me ask you about the first thing, which is the idea of finding buried treasure. It's effectively that, because a share certificate means that you had these certificates much before dematerialization. What is the implication of that, first of all?
So you're right, Alex. I mean, post SEBI coming out with these guidelines that shares cannot be transferred in physical form. So earlier there was a provision that you had shares in the demat form, or you owned shares in physical form. If you wish to transfer, okay, the first thing that SEBI closed down was that you cannot sell your physical shares through the exchange. However, there was a provision that you can transfer shares between two individuals in the physical form. So if I owned physical shares, I am not allowed to sell on the exchange because the exchange would not handle physical shares anymore. But if I wanted to transfer these shares to somebody, okay, one-to-one, I could do that. And the registrar would happily transfer the shares.
Okay.
Then came further guidelines saying that physical shares cannot be transferred at all. So now if I'm owning physical shares, I have to compulsorily get it dematted. Only then can I either sell them on the exchange or I can transfer to somebody else. So post that regulation coming out, we saw so many investors going and digging up their, the wardrobes and finding that there were physical shares lying with them. So the first step, of course, was to get them dematerialized. So that process is fairly simple. It's not as complicated. Where the complication arises is in case the owner of those shares, like as you mentioned, that if they were in your grandparents' name, if they were in some other family member's name who are deceased, then there is a complication which possibly needs to be handled. However, if you own shares in your own name and they are in physical certificate form, it's fairly simple to go.
So let's talk about that first before we get into how to manage shares that were owned by somebody who's no more. So if you're the owner of the shares, which I think we've heard a couple of our viewers have also reached out to say that we have these old share certificates, how do we demat it? What is the process?
So the first step, I mean, if you have shares of say XYZ company, you look at the name combination that is there on the share certificate. Okay, so if it's the first name is yours and second name is that of your wife or some other family member, ensure that you open a demat account in the same combination.
Okay.
So if you own shares in a joint name, do not just open a demat account only in your single name because the shares will not get dematted.
Okay.
Okay, so you'll have to open a demat account in the same combination, and then you submit a demat request form. It's a DRF form. You submit that along with your share certificates.
To whom?
To your depository participant, where you've opened your demat account. So to your DP.
Okay.
So you submit those forms to them along with the share certificate, which will be then processed.
A copy of the share certificate?
The original share certificates need to be given.
Okay.
So you will need to give that, and then the DP will forward that details to the company. The company will verify it, confirm it, and the shares will get credited in a demat account.
How much time does that normally take?
So about a 15-20 days is something, working days is something that you should very comfortably assume that it's going to take. It could take sometimes even longer. Okay, now here also you could have one bit of complication, wherein your name is, suppose you're the first holder, and the second holder is deceased.
That's what it's going to come to, yeah.
Yeah. So in this case, you are the first holder, but the second holder is deceased. So you can then submit a death certificate for the second holder.
Okay.
But open a demat account in a single name because now you cannot open the demat account in joint names because the second holder is no more. And you submit documents of the deceased, as in the death certificate, etc., and then you can process for dematerialization. So there is a way.
But what if you're the second holder and the first holder is deceased, then what?
No, so then you have to basically claim, it's like the holder of the shares being deceased, and then you have to process the transmission in the form of whether there is a nomination or not.
Oh, so that's the second level.
Yeah,
We'll come to that. We'll come to that. Before we do, now here's the interesting thing, right? Because there are so many of those legends, pretty much, right? If you say, oh, you bought 20 shares of Infosys in 1993,
correct,
it's now worth this much money.
Right.
Effectively, that's because there are bonus share issues,
right.
there's so many corporate actions, there's splits of shares that take place.
Correct.
So effectively, if we're talking about a share certificate, it existed maybe before the turn of the century, right?
Correct.
So in that time, how does all of that corporate action get accounted for?
Yes. So now, again, a scenario where there is a corporate action. So first we spoke about a scenario, plain simple, you had shares and you just went and dematerialized them. Now, if you believe that there has been some corporate action, so which means there is bonus, split, there is merger acquisitions, there could be so many other things. So the first thing is you have to get your entitlement from the company. So you write to the company, say, I want the updated share quantity that I have. So this I'm talking about a scenario where you are the owner and you're alive,
sure,
and you are processing your application. So that's fairly simple. Now you have to check whether the records with the company. So hypothetically, you own shares, and 10 years ago, and you've not given them your updated bank details. You've not given them your updated address. Now the company has announced dividends, and they have sent it at some address which you were living in, say probably 10 years ago.
Right.
They send you dividend checks.
Right.
Okay, which you've not encashed.
Right.
Now, if you've not done all this for 7 years, 7 consecutive years. That money, then that shares along with the dividend and all other corporate actions get transferred to the government under the Investor Education Protection Fund.
Right.
So that is the first step that you have to first check.
So you have to recover that money.
No, that's another process altogether.
Oh, okay.
So there are 2 legs again to this.
Okay.
So say suppose 10 years ago, you have not updated details. The company tried to reach out to you, but because they did not have your correct address, they did not have your bank details, etc., the dividends did not get credited in your bank account.
Right.
So they were unclaimed for 7 years and beyond. So that money then has gone to the Investor Education Protection Fund of the government.
Right.
Then there is a recovery process to do from there. The other scenario is that you have been getting your dividend warrants and you've been cashing it.
Right.
So then it is still lying with the company. It has not gone anywhere. So now in this case, you will have to write to the company and take an updated share entitlement. So suppose your shares from 20 shares has become say 200 shares now. So first you get that entitlement, you write to the company that, okay, now this is my KYC updated. Okay, give me all the shares that are in my name now.
Is this before or after you dematerialize?
This is before.
Before you dematerialize.
Because how would you dematerialize the number of shares?
You need
when
to have the exact value, correct.
So then you write to the company, get your entitlement. Now in this case, the company will not issue you fresh equity shares. So they'll not send you a share certificate.
Sure.
They'll send you a letter, okay, which confirms your entitlement, saying that, okay, this is the quantum of shares that you're owning after all corporate actions. Now this confirmation letter has to be submitted along with the DRF form, the demat request form, because now you don't have the updated share certificate, and the companies cannot issue any more.
Right.
So they'll give you a letter, confirmation letter.
Right.
That letter you attach, the original letter, you attach with your demat request form, and you submit it to the deposit, to your DP,
right,
who will then dematerialize it.
Okay.
So you don't need the fresh certificates of the correct amount.
Okay.
You just need that entitlement letter.
Okay.
That has to be done within 120 days
of the issue of that letter.
Issue of that letter. Say, for example, you do not have a demat account, but you had some shares allotted to you. You write to the company, you get everything processed. The company says, now you have 200 shares. And this is a joint holding. Suppose first holder is X and first holder is, second holder is Y.
Yeah.
So they give you 120 days that you will open a demat account also, no? In that combination.
Yeah.
So you open a demat account and there you submit that
And then
letter.
It takes 15 days.
It takes 15, 20 days, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Now scenario 1, wherein the owner is deceased.
Right.
So now you're making a claim on that share saying that, look, I am the legal heir of this person.
Yeah.
These were the shares allotted to my grandfather. I found these share certificates, but the person is no more. So you apply to the company. Company says, look, hey, you didn't come to me for 7 years. As per the regulations, I've transferred the money to IEPF.
Sure.
So then that process starts with IEPF.
Okay.
Now you're within 7 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So hypothetically, you're within 7 years,
Yes.
scenario 1.
Yeah.
So the shares are lying with the company.
Yeah.
The corporate action, everything's with the company. They still haven't transferred to the IEPF. So your process to claim those shares will be with the company alone.
Okay.
In this
But you have
case.
to prove to them that you're the legal heir.
Yes. So then one is, was there a nomination?
Affidavit then is required.
So affidavit, indemnity, all that will be required. So that is in case there is nomination.
Sure.
In case the value of those shares is nominal, so it's not say if it's say 2 lakhs or 5 lakhs, each company has different, it's essentially say 5 lakhs. If the value of those entitlement is 5 lakhs and below, then the company might just simply ask you to give an affidavit, indemnity, etc., NOCs from the other legal heirs, and they process it. In case the value of the shares is more than 5 lakhs, then there is a court involved in it, wherein the succession certificate or will probate.
Which court?
So you'll have to go to the local district high court, or no, sorry, not district, but the city high court.
Sure.
And you'll have to prove whether, how am I claiming this? Suppose a person goes to the company and the shares worth, say, 7 lakhs and says, give it to me.
You have to prove.
You have to prove. So there has to be a succession certificate, or there has to be a will which has to be probated. There has to be a process wherein the company needs to identify you to be the legal heir.
Yes.
So the courts get involved. If it's below 5 lakhs, then the companies would have their own system of things to do, wherein they would say, okay, give me an indemnity bond with an affidavit.
Is it difficult through the court proceedings and all of that?
So one is that as a legal heir, you're claiming yourself to be a legal heir of the deceased.
Sure.
You make an application to the court saying that I am the sole legal heir, or I am a legal heir along with somebody else. So all those people make an application to the court saying that we are the successors of this deceased.
Yes.
The court has its process of verification, and then they give you a succession certificate.
That can take time?
I think minimum 1.5 years you would wait.
Probates itself take time.
So will being probated or a succession certificate, if there is no dispute at all, then the normal process would take about 1.5 to 2 years.
Sure.
If there is a dispute wherein you go and claim saying that I am the legal heir, and there is somebody else also makes an objection to that application, then it'll go on for decades, because there's going to be argument, there's going to be all of those things happening. So that will go on for decades, but if there is no dispute, the normal process in a court will take about 1.5 to 2 years. So it depends on the value, it depends on whether there is a nomination or not, and all of those processes, and then you'll be able to claim your shares.
And if there's no will then?
So succession certificate comes into picture. So the legal heir will go and make an application to the court saying that we are the legal heirs. We are the successor of this particular person.
And then how do you recover from the IPF, which is the investor protection
so
fund?
that's where it gets very complicated, because now in this situation, 7 years have elapsed and there has been no communication. So the company says that we cannot identify who the shareholder is. So as per regulations, I'm transferring this the shares and the dividends, unclaimed dividends, everything. It goes to the government under the Investor Education Protection Fund. This falls under the MCA, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Okay, now, so if you now realize that, okay, I am the one who's entitled to these shares, then I have to first go to the IEPF website, first check whether the shares have gone there. So there is a search, there under the head services, you'll find a drop-down menu where you can go and search with your name, folio numbers, if you know the details. Other just write in your name and just try and search. So there, the shares will reflect, saying that
the name of the holder,
the name of the shareholder, the deceased shareholder in that context. So they will show what shares are lying with them. Now, with this, now you have to go to the company, the issuing company, the share issuing company. You have to go to them, and then you have to process the entire set of documents to say, look, I am the person who's legally succeeding this person, so succession certificate or the affidavit, indemnity bonds, etc. You have to process that everything with the company. The company, if they're satisfied with all the documentation, will give you an entitlement certificate. So they'll tell you, okay, now fine, I've identified you to be the legal heir after completing, whether through court or otherwise. We've identified you to be the legal heir. Now take this entitlement certificate, go to IEPF and tell them, look, I'm entitled to these shares, give it back to me. So now you go back to the IEPF, there you fill in a form 5, you fill in all those details saying that I'm the claimant of this particular share, please give it to me. Now, after you filled in the form 5, everything, you go back to the company, the nodal officer of the company, and then you submit all those documents again to them, and then they'll give you a letter. The
updated letter.
They'll verify it. They'll verify everything, and that verification will go back to IPF to say, look, now everything is verified. This person is the claimant of these particular shares, so give it back to them. So then IPF will process and give you the shares back. Now it sounds very simple.
No, it's not. No, it does not sound very simple, Ash. Let me be very frank with you.
Okay, so process-wise, there is a process laid down. There is a timeline laid down as well. But that is all theoretical in nature. When you go into the details of the list of documents, you're back and forth communicating with two entities. One is a company, one is IPF. It is going to take time. And then there are complications of what set of documents. Then there are legal heirship. There could be more than one legal heirs. So a consent affidavit of the ones of the others. So it's a bit of a complicated case.
So it's complicated. Now, just to close out this conversation, I heard of a case, it was pointed out by somebody that said that somebody was offering to do this or to facilitate this, but was saying 30% of the value of the shares you need to give me. Is that weird? Is that too much?
So every time there is something required to be done, there will be somebody helping you to do that. Like even the smallest of things in India, when you have to get smallest of things done, there'll be somebody helping you to do that, right? So yes, I mean, there are norms, I mean, because there is a process. Now somebody has to do this documentation. Somebody has to be, so you're appointing somebody to represent you to do this work for you.
Sure.
Okay, so there's nothing to do with IPF, nothing to do with the company. You're on your personal level, appointing somebody else to help you with this documentation.
So it's a fee that you determine between the two of you.
So generally the market trend would be 10 to 15% to 30%,
Sure.
depending on the complication of the matter, depending on the value of the transaction, depending on several other factors. So it's about you finding somebody who can do it at a cheaper price for you. Somebody could be charging you a fixed fee, somebody could charge you 30% of the value, somebody could charge you 5% of the value. So you just have to find somebody who can help you do that. And there are a whole set of people who made this full-time business.
Okay.
So, there are few people who are doing this as a full-time basis, as a proper business.
In your opinion, what is the outside limit of time that you should expect if it is not a very complicated case, if it's a slightly complicated?
Let me put it like this, the minimum time that you should take in mind.
A couple of years?
It's at least 1 year, if everything goes smoothly.
Okay.
If not, it can drag on for as much.
So I'm glad that dematerialization has happened. And
so I think, I always say this in all forums. I mean, SEBI has been one of the finest regulators. I mean, they have been very proactive with anything that the market requires. They very quickly come out with regulations. Let me point out one thing that they've done. So there was a Carvey case where shares were transferred off market in their private account and something like that. You know, that thing had come out.
Yeah.
SEBI instantly came out with a regulation saying that there has to be a two-factor authentication. So anytime the shares are getting transferred off market, there has to be a OTP-based approval from the shareholder, from the account holder. So I think the rise of the capital market has been because of the efficiency of SEBI.